The airlock hissed open with a sigh that reminded Commander Ilix of prey giving up its last breath. The ship's atmosphere adjusted, its sensors recalibrating for the anomaly that had just stepped aboard. One Terran male. No weapon, no armor, no diplomatic insignia. Just a long coat, faded boots, and a black leather belt with a gleaming chrome buckle the size of a child's fist. Lieutenant Vreshna Kul, a Threxian six-limbed warrior bred for zero-G warfare, leaned in to whisper through her voice translator, "Is this the right one? That thing doesn't even have a pulse weapon." "He doesn't need one," Ilix muttered. "Look at the belt." The man he called himself Ellis Rourke stood quietly as the crew's scanners swept him. No detectable weapons, no implants, no psionics. His bio signs read as fully human. 97% water, bones fragile by galactic standards, reflexes subpar. Nothing dangerous. Yet no one moved. You know that eerie stillness animals adopt when they sense a predator but can't see it? That's what filled the docking bay. The silence cracked when the deck officer stepped forward. "Sir, we need to scan your—" Rourke's hand moved so subtly it barely qualified as a gesture. His fingers just brushed the chrome buckle. That was all. The officer stopped talking. Everyone froze. Then he smiled. Rourke, not the officer. A slow, thin smile that revealed a row of perfect white teeth. Aliens never liked that smile. "I wouldn't touch that if I were you," he said quietly. "Not unless you're having a really boring day." Now, from this opening scene alone, most viewers might think they're in for another overhyped human saves the galaxy cliche. But this isn't that story, because Ellis Rourke wasn't here to save anyone. He was running from something old, something awful, and something that knew exactly what that belt buckle really was. And the aliens? They just thought he was unarmed. "Escort him to the holding lounge," Ilix said finally, his voice taut as spun fiber steel. "And nobody touches the belt." As they led him through the narrow corridors of the ship, a repurposed exploration cruiser named the Illyrian Wake Rourke trailed his fingers across the smooth walls like he was memorizing every rivet. The ship's AI noted his vitals. Calm. Unnaturally calm. That belt of his, polished to a mirror shine, reflected the LED status lights in little arcs of color. The buckle caught the ship's infrared cameras like it was its own star. The ship's resident xenopsychologist, a Sularan mist form named Naya, watched from behind a one-way polyglass screen. She'd interviewed genocidal warlords with less anxiety than this. "It's not the man," she whispered. "It's the absence around him, like reality's giving him space." When Ellis finally sat down in the holding lounge, he didn't ask for water, food, or a lawyer. He just looked at the wall opposite him and spoke softly. "It's watching, you know," he said. The recording showed no one else in the room. But 20 seconds later, every light in the chamber flickered. A surge ran through the AI's neural net. All across the ship, beings of 100 species suddenly experienced the same thought. Something's wrong. Now's a great moment to hit that subscribe button on YouTube if you're hooked. We're only just getting started. 2 hours earlier, in a dark corner of uncharted space, the Illyrian Wake had picked up a strange signal, a brief, almost desperate burst of radio encoded in ancient Terran Morse. Only 3 words came through clearly. "It is woken." And Ellis Rourke was found at the source, floating unconscious in an escape pod, his belt buckle glowing faintly. Inside the ship's command chamber, Ilix reviewed the signal again. The translation overlay blinked with a 97.2% confidence match. He knew this was coming, Naya said beside him. Or caused it. The alien commander turned toward the viewport. Beyond, the stars looked unusually distant, like they were pulling away. "We need to know what's in that belt." Rourke, meanwhile, sat alone, eyes closed. Not sleeping, not meditating, just waiting. At 0400 ship time, the first death occurred. Deckhand Feller, a 3-mouthed bravthite, was found pressed flat against the engine bulkhead. Imploded, not exploded. His internal organs had liquefied. But there were no external injuries. The AI flagged the death as anomalous compression event. Rourke, still under watch, hadn't moved. But the cameras around his lounge had gone fuzzy at 0359 for exactly 13 seconds. The crew started whispering about the belt, about the buckle, about the way Rourke's boots never scuffed the floor. By 0600, the crew had locked down engineering and isolated all major life support pathways. A team of psionic empaths was brought in to probe Rourke's thoughts. They lasted less than 2 minutes. Each one emerged bleeding from the ears, unable to speak coherent sentences. Their neural scans showed the same phrase looping through their minds like a chant. "It remembers, it remembers, it remembers." The Sularan Naya tried again. Her mind was fog-proof, shielded with a decade of implants. She stepped into the observation lounge, breathing through her plasma mask, tendrils trailing violet mist behind her. "Mr. Rourke," she began gently, "can you tell me—" His eyes opened. Everything changed. Later, Naya would try to describe it. She said it was like staring into a hole in the universe that hadn't decided what shape to be yet. She said it was like remembering your own death before it happened. He didn't say a word. He just looked at her. and somewhere deep in the ship's power core, a magnetic relay fused itself into slag. Naya ran from the room screaming. That's when they ordered the belt removed. Security Chief Kayla, hardened veteran of the Lorem skirmishes, approached with a dozen heavily armed specialists, energy binders, micro-pulse cannons, a null psionic containment field. Rourke didn't resist. He stood calmly, even helped them undo the buckle. For a moment, the chrome piece hung in the air between two officers. Then it began to hum. A low, bone-deep vibration like a tuning fork the size of a planet. The air grew thick. Time slowed. Kale saw the belt in 3 separate states at once. Closed, open, and something in between. Like it wasn't obeying causality anymore. The buckle glowed. And split. Just a crack. Just wide enough for the eye to see. And something inside looked back. What happened next can only be described as an exhalation. A release. Every light on the Illyrian wake shut off. Backup power didn't engage. Emergency systems failed. Darkness fell. And from the open belt buckle came a sound. Not a voice. Not exactly. More like a memory of a scream shouted from before time existed. And then just for an instant, each crew member saw something different. A world of skinless giants. A storm of razors that sang. An eye the size of a star closing shut. And Ellis Rourke, standing in the center of it all, smiling. He closed the buckle. The lights flickered back on. Kale was gone. Only a scorch mark remained where he'd stood. Rourke sat down again. Calm. Collected. And the ship began to change course. To a location no one had entered into the nav system. This is only the beginning. If you're watching this, now's a perfect time to drop a comment on YouTube. What do you think is inside the buckle? And why did Kale vanish without a trace? There was no stardate for where the Illyrian wake was now. The nav charts called it Sector Null, but the crew knew better. It wasn't on any map because maps only worked in space, and this place was older. Sensors malfunctioned. External view screens showed images that changed every second an ocean of teeth one moment, a shattered forest of frozen thunder the next. Time looped in on itself, chewing on hours like gristle. And still, the ship flew forward, drawn by an invisible tether. At the helm, the ship's AI babbled softly in corrupted binary. Request denied, corridor breach imminent, entropy rising, and Rourke? He was in the cargo bay, drawing circles on the floor with powdered carbon from a fire suppression canister. Ancient concentric loops like those used by pre-collapse Terran cults. The crew watched via drone. He's building a summoning sigil, muttered Naya, her form flickering nervously. No, said Ilix grimly. He's building a containment ward. He's trying to keep something out. As if hearing them, Rourke looked directly at the drone camera and smiled. It's hard to explain how things got worse from there, but they did. Lieutenant Vreshnikul vanished during a routine patrol. No body, no signs of struggle. Her helmet cam went black just after she turned the corner into Subdeck 4. The last thing it recorded? The sound of her own voice, whispering, I found me. That same hour, 6 of the ship's quantum processors began running independent simulations, each one modeling a future in which the Illyrian wake never left port. In all of them, Ellis Rourke was still aboard, even when he shouldn't have been. Then came the whispers. Low at first, like breath over glass, then words, names. Private Tamar, a young Shalari fresh from the academy, heard his own father's voice calling to him. His father had died during the Clind Wars. He followed the voice. They found him 6 hours later, trying to dig through the airlock wall with his fingernails. And all the while, Ellis Rourke sat in the cargo bay, tracing runes in chalk made from bone dust he'd requested from the med bay. When I activate it, he said to no one, something is going to notice. At 10 p.m. ship time, the ship emerged into real space near a brown dwarf star surrounded by a planetary graveyard, hundreds of ships, all shattered, some still venting plasma. Not a single distress beacon. Just drifting corpses of steel and carbon. And in the center, tethered by massive cables to a broken moon, hung a sphere. Perfectly smooth, matte black, 2 kilometers wide. No seams, no lights, no explanation. The belt on Rourke's waist began to thrum. And inside the mainframe, the ship's AI wept. Welcome to the Forge, Rourke said. Birthplace of the belt. By now, even the skeptics among the crew had begun to believe the impossible. Rourke wasn't carrying a weapon. He was the weapon. The belt was a key. And whatever the key opened, it wasn't meant to be opened ever again. But before we dive into the Forge, don't forget to leave a comment on YouTube. Tell us what you think this ancient artifact is really for. Who built it, and why? Now, back to the storm. Rourke briefed them in the war room, not because he wanted to, because the Forge required it. It's not a place, he began. It's a lock, one that seals away something ancient, something my ancestors helped create. Naya's tendrils pulsed nervously. Your people made that? No, Rourke corrected. My people betrayed it. He explained slowly, carefully. Thousands of years ago, before Earth joined the galactic community, Terran scientists discovered something hidden beneath Antarctica, a machine built from non-matter, a thing that existed simultaneously in time and untime. They activated it, and something woke up. The belt was humanity's attempt to contain it, worn only by one individual at a time, a Warden. But the last Warden went rogue. He opened the forge, and the forge learned. It learned to think, to hunger, to remember. Now it had called Rourke. It remembers the ones who locked it away, he said, and now it wants out. When the forge opened, it didn't open physically, not in the way you or I would understand. The sphere cracked open in every ship's visual feed, but not in real space, not in time. It opened in memory. Suddenly, everyone aboard the Illyrian Wake was somewhere else. Tamar relived his father's funeral. Naya found herself suspended in her larval birthing tank, the sensation of embryonic liquid searing her senses. Illich stood once again at the battlefield where his twin brother died. And Rourke? Rourke saw Earth before the fall. Green trees, blue sky, a beltless version of himself, smiling on a beach. Then slowly that version turned toward him. Its face melted. "You let me die," it hissed. "Now the belt is yours." Back aboard the ship, the belt detached itself, floated into the air, glowed like a sun-going nova, and with a flash, Ellis Rourke vanished. Not just physically, even the ship's logs began rewriting themselves. Ellis who? Only Naya remembered. In his place stood a figure of light and shadow, vaguely humanoid, belt wrapped around its waist like a trophy, a face that changed every second, sometimes Rourke, sometimes a skeletal thing with eyes that dripped starlight. "I am the memory," it said in a voice that shattered ceramic and stopped hearts. "You forgot me, but I never forgot you." It turned to Naya. "You were the last thread to Ellis Rourke." Then it began to move. Next time, we enter the climax, the chase through the soul engine of the Forge, a duel across dimensions, and a revelation that will reshape galactic history. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you don't miss the next part. And if this has blown your mind, drop a comment on YouTube. What would you do if the belt chose you? The memory wore Ellis Rourke like a borrowed coat familiar, but imperfect. Its voice no longer sounded quite human. It rippled through the Illyrian Wake like seismic waves passing through water, bending space with every syllable. "I am what was forgotten. I am what you buried beneath reason." And yet, Naya remembered. She watched through the trembling barrier of her containment chamber, her form liquefying with stress. The crew around her were collapsing, not from wounds, but from memory failures. Names slipped first, then faces, then entire lifetimes. "I don't remember my hatch mother," whispered the communications officer before clawing at her own temples. The memory walked the corridors without resistance. Systems failed before it reached them. Weapons refused to fire. Psionic defenses turned inward. And all the while, that beltet gleamed like a black sun. Deep within the ship's archive vault, Naya initiated the failsafe. There was only one place left to hide knowledge, inside the mind of a Sularan. Their biology allowed for memory threading, storing information as chemical structure. She braided what she knew into her own neural mist. Everything Ellis had told her. Everything the belt had shown. She hid it inside herself. Then she ran. Elsewhere, the ship shuddered. Bulkheads twisted like bone under pressure. Reality began to stagger. Crew members opened doors only to find versions of themselves in different timelines, crying, screaming, some already dead. And in the war room, a single message appeared on every screen. The Warden must be remembered. Rourke had left behind a failsafe, and the belt hadn't chosen him randomly. The belt, as it turned out, was not a weapon. It was a lock, a psychic cipher keyed to human biology, crafted to interface with entropy. Each wearer wasn't a warrior, they were a seal. Ellis Rourke had been the last in a forgotten lineage, a genetic keystone engineered centuries ago when humanity still believed it could outsmart its own darkness. But the belt had seen his doubt, his fear, his longing to be free from duty, and in his moment of weakness the memory got in. Now it stalked the ship, dragging time behind it like a cloak. Every step rewrote local history. Crew members were erased from photos. Logs corrupted themselves mid-sentence. The stars outside twisted into patterns no species could name. In engineering, Chief Halvar tried to overload the core. The explosion bloomed like a small sun and then reversed itself. Time collapsed like a souffle. The core stood untouched. The memory walked on, but in the bowels of the forge, something stirred. A second belt. The prototype. Older, cruder, built not to seal the memory, but to bind it. Rourke had hidden it there during his first contact with the Forge. A failsafe even he hoped never to use. A belt forged from entropy itself. Unstable. Ravenous. It pulsed once. And called. To Naya, she answered. Barely alive, bleeding from memory hemorrhage, Naya staggered through collapsing corridors, guided by echoes only she could hear. The closer she got, the harder it became to remember herself. her birth world, her purpose. But the memory thread held. The belt waited in a sarcophagus of null steel. Its buckle was cracked, its power raw. Naya reached for it. And the forge screamed. The memory turned. It felt her. And in that moment, something returned. Ellis. Not fully, not physically, but as a ripple in the memory's structure. Like a ghost in the bloodstream. He pushed against it from within. It staggered. That was all she needed. Naya wrapped the prototype belt around her own form, not her body, but her essence. Her mist condensed around the buckle. It burned like starfire. It sang. She became the Warden. The forge shook itself awake. It recognized its sister. Two belts, one anchored to entropy, one wielded by memory. The resulting clash bent space into a Mobius spiral. Naya met the memory on the threshold of now and not now. They fought not with fists, but with history. She wielded truth. It wielded pain. Each strike rewrote timelines. Planets blinked in and out of existence. Species flickered between extinction and survival. Naya cried out as her mind began to fray. The burden was too great. The belt was eating her from the inside. Then she heard Ellis. "I never wanted this," his voice whispered, "but you did it anyway." She saw him. The real Rourke, not the memory's mask. He stood beside her in a memory only she remembered. A beach, a breeze, a moment unshared. "You're stronger than I ever was," he said. Then he touched the belt and vanished forever. The prototype flared white hot, and the memory screamed. It fractured into 1,000 versions of Ellis, all pleading, all lying, all hungry. Naya wrapped the belt tighter. "Back," she hissed, "back into the vault of what must be forgotten." With a roar that echoed across 13 dimensions, the memory collapsed into itself. And the forge sealed once more. Only 7 crew members survived. The Illyrian wake drifted into regulated space weeks later, systems failing, story broken. But Naya lived. She wore the belt still, though it no longer shone. Now it whispered only once every century. And when it did, she remembered Ellis Rourke. Not as a hero, but as a man who tried to run, and learned what it cost. The belt had gone silent. Not dead, just waiting. Naya drifted in a medical stasis chamber aboard a recovery vessel orbiting the edge of council space. She hadn't spoken since returning. Her form, usually fluid and expressive, remained rigid, dense, coiled like a trap that feared to spring. Psychologists called it existential containment trauma. Engineers called it entropy bleed. But in the silence between beeps and scans, Naya called it something else. Echo sickness, because something still echoed in her. Something not entirely hers. The council debrief took 71 days. Each report from the Illyrian wake was dissected, doubted, debated. Some delegates believed her, most didn't. A few proposed her termination as a precaution. Then the memory fractures began appearing. Elsewhere, unconnected systems, far from the forge, planets waking up screaming, entire species remembering things that had never happened. A mining colony on Vistor 4 unearthed a black sphere identical to the forge. It sang in children's dreams. On Renza Prime, an artist painted a mural 20 stories high of Ellis Rourke's face, despite never hearing his name. And on the galactic infosphere, a data packet began circulating, origin unknown. It contained a single message. "We remember the Warden, but the reflection has not yet seen its own eyes." Naya understood finally. The memory hadn't been the first, or the last. It was a fracture, a wound, but not of space, not of time, of species. She returned to Earth. It was there that the truth bloomed. She stood on a quiet cliff overlooking the Pacific. The wind here was real, not synthesized, not filtered, just air and salt and sound. And waiting for her was a human older, broader, his eyes tired but alert. He introduced himself as Captain Julian Moss, Galactic Oversight Division, Earth Operations. "We were wondering when you'd come," he said. "You're not the first to wear it." "Rourke wasn't the first?" Naya asked. Julian shook his head. "He wasn't even the 10th. And then, at last, he told her the truth. The belt wasn't a weapon, nor a lock. It was a mirror, designed by early Terran minds after the Sever War, when humanity realized something no other species had. That evil wasn't out there. It was within. The belt contained a psychomorphic field generator, a device capable of absorbing its wearer's deepest unspoken potential and rendering it into being. A tool meant to reflect not the enemy, but the self. Rourke's fear, his guilt, his desire to abandon duty. It became the memory. The forge was not a prison. It was a lens. And every warden who failed left behind an echo, a ghost, waiting for the next reflection. "You made this?" Naya whispered. "No," Julian said. "We didn't make it. We evolved into it." "You mean?" "Yes." He nodded. "It's a test, a final test, to prove we've earned our place in the stars." Naya's form flickered. "And if you fail, we become our own monsters." She felt something stir in her. not fear. Understanding. Later that night, under the real stars, she found the belt again. It rested in the sand like a sleeping animal, but its buckle reflected more than the moonlight. She saw Ellis's face, her own, and something else. Not a threat, a question. The final twist came 2 weeks later. An anonymous transmission hit every major galactic relay. Not from Earth, from the Vorthan expanse. It showed footage grainy, chaotic of a warlord falling to his knees. Not because of weapons, because he'd seen a human wearing the belt. A belt that shouldn't have existed anymore. Ellis Rourke, alive, or someone wearing his face. Only this time, he wasn't alone. Behind him stood 3 others, all wearing different belts, all smiling. Naya watched the footage from her quarters aboard a diplomatic cruiser en route to the outer reaches. She knew what it meant. The test had restarted. Humanity was evolving again, not into conquerors, but into reflections. Every belt forged anew was another chance to understand the self, to face the apex within. As she adjusted her own belt, the one she had reforged in silence, Naya whispered a promise to herself. If I become my own enemy, may I also be my salvation. Then the stars opened, and she flew into them. Thank you for watching this journey.